Hi, this is Dan Eisner with Key Insight Coaching, and I'm back with the 7 gateways to unlocking your inner peace and potential. And today we're talking about gateway number 7, understanding the process of change. I love this picture because I think it paints a very realistic picture of what it's like as we embark on this process of change. One minute or one day we're feeling pretty great. The next day we're feeling like we're down on our luck. Then we're kind of climbing back up. Then we feel like we're on top of the world again. I think that's, again, a very realistic picture of what it's like. But as you've probably heard me say before, I love that quote, experience without knowledge is ignorance. I think we all have a lot of experience of kind of going through, this sort of process. Well, if we understand, if we have a little bit of the knowledge base behind the process of change, I think it's one of those things that can make it much easier as we commit to really, really changing ourselves. And so I'm hoping this video will give you a little bit of insight that can point you in the right direction. But one of the most important things to understand is that change is really not easy. It's not easy and it really hurts. But this kind of points to one of my favorite resources, which is Deepak Chopra's The 7 Laws of Spiritual Success. And one of the laws that he talks about is the law of least effort. And the basic idea is that we should always be doing what takes the least amount of effort to do. So let's use this as an example. What do you think would take less effort? Tolerating short periods of sharp pain or tolerating long-term chronic pain? If you're like most people, you'd probably say, well, I'd rather just kind of have that sharp pain, just like rip off the Band-Aid, let's just get it over with. And I think that's what most people would say. But that's really what change is. Okay, in the short term, it hurts. But in the long term, it's much easier. But so many of us, we're so scared of changing that we use every ounce of our energy to kind of stay the same, and that's what creates so much unnecessary suffering in the world. Again, in the short term, it doesn't hurt as much, but in the long term, it's really very detrimental to our sense of well-being. There's actually a book called Change or Die. I've never actually read it, but the basic idea is that so many of us would rather die than actually change, when the reality is change is actually much easier than it is to stay the same. And I think this especially holds true when we're talking about getting a better understanding of who we are and what motivates our thinking and behavior. And as I've discussed before, this isn't as much about learning new information as it is about deepening our understanding of what we already know. Much like in the case of an iceberg, only 10% is above the ground, the rest is beneath the surface. And the same holds true when it comes to really understanding ourselves. It takes a commitment to really dig beneath the surface. And one of the most valuable things that I've come to learn is that there really are 2 types of understanding. One is intellectual. So as an example, we all know that we shouldn't worry. We all have that knowledge, and that's pretty easy to understand. Yet I think most of us probably worry a lot more than we would like to. Well, the other type of understanding is emotional understanding, and that's more of I don't worry, and that's what wisdom is. What I'm always interested in is, well, how do we go from a place where we understand something intellectually to a place where we really understand it emotionally and we can use it to our advantage? Well, that's where we really have to get that little voice, that little I know that voice. That's the voice of our silly little ego. We have to learn to sort of quiet that down. And I recently heard a quote that I think speaks to this just beautifully. And this is from Sean Stevenson. And he said, when a novice hears something that it already knows, he says, I already know that. And I teach this and I practice this, and I have to admit, a lot of times I catch myself saying, I already know that. He says, when a master hears something that he's heard before, he says, thank you for the reminder. And it's one of those little tidbits that is really speaks, it's, very simple, but is very profound in just how much of an effect that really being conscious of that can have. Because every time we really embrace the fact that we can always take what we know and understand it in a more deeper, more meaningful way, that's how we can really facilitate the process of change and really make it much easier than it is typically. But I love knowledge, and I think there's a little bit of knowledge that can make this process of change a little bit easier. And this is what I got from it's what Joe Dispenza calls stages of competence. I like to call it stages of knowing. And this is from his book called Evolve Your Brain, The Science of Changing Your Mind. He talks about these 4 stages. So the first stage is that we're unconsciously incompetent. So we don't even know that we we have a problem. Well, I use a simple example. Let's say I'm a road rager, and I've been really out of control as a road rager. Now you could argue, well, I know on some level that I'm a road rager. I'm conscious about that. But let's say, for argument's sake, that I really believe there's absolutely nothing I can do about that, and this is just who I am. I think a lot of us, if we're honest with ourselves, kind of get stuck in that unconsciously incompetent phase where we really don't even recognize that we have a choice in the matter. It's very easy to trick ourselves. The second stage is consciously incompetent. This is where now I'm kind of finally aware of the fact that this road rage thing is an issue, and I have no idea how I'm supposed to keep myself calm in traffic, but at least now I'm conscious of the fact that this is an issue and that maybe there's something that I can do about it. Once I get to that second stage, now it's possible, and it's not possible for me to move forward until I become conscious of whatever is going on with me. And that's what takes, again, it takes commitment and courage to really look at ourselves, to really become more conscious of the things that we really don't understand about ourselves very well. But then we can move into the third stage, which is becoming consciously competent. So that's where now I'm working on my road rage problem. I can keep myself calm, but I've really got to kind of stay on top of my game. I really have to have my list of coping skills ready. I've got to think about it ahead of time if I think I'm going to get into traffic or whatever. In other words, I can really sort of maintain myself, but it takes effort. It's kind of like I'm learning a new dance move, or I'm learning a new skill like skiing, and I can do it, but I've really got to be thinking about all all the things I've learned to be able to do it. But if I continue that, if I can really stay with, if I can continue to practice, eventually what's going to happen is I become unconsciously competent. And this is where, as Joe describes it, now I don't even have to think about it anymore. It's really programmed. It's inside my body. I don't even have to think about it. Well, in my experience, so many of us, we spend so much of our time unconsciously incompetent. We don't even recognize that we have these issues. And then as we start to sort of wake up to the fact that, our stressed way of living is no longer, working for us, and we start to become consciously incompetent, then we really start to, move on to the next stage of consciously incompetent. And in my experience, this is something that, depending on the particular skill that we're learning, and particularly when it comes to really understanding ourselves emotionally, this is something that we can, it takes time. And it takes time and practice, and we have to, keep practicing and keep practicing and keep practicing. But eventually, as we keep doing this and we get more comfortable sort of, getting out in the world and really practicing these things that we're learning, as we take on more understanding of meditation and we take on more understanding of, how we're wired and how our thoughts affect our behavior, slowly what happens is we start to become unconsciously competent. It starts to get programmed into our body. It starts to become much, much, much easier. But in my experience, the more we understand that it just takes time, and we might get it one day and we might feel like we've got it, and then the next day it's like, oh my God, it's I thought I had this under my control and now we don't. Well, that's because when we've been doing things for a certain way for a long time, it takes time to really get it programmed into our body. But the more we practice and the more we understand that that's just part of the process, in my experience, is one of those things that can make the process of change, much, much, much easier to tolerate. So it really requires, a commitment. And this is something, you might have heard before, which is constant and never-ending improvement. It's not one of those things that we just, we learn something and then we just stop. It's one of those things that we have to sort of keep going and keep going. And I don't want to make it seem like a stressful thing, but more of just what else can I do? How can I, what's next on my list? What's the next thing that can really sort of, evolve me as a human being and make me feel much more alive and successful and peaceful in my life. So it's really, really requires commitment. So this was, again, the 7th gateway to unlocking your inner peace potential. Again, it's all about understanding the process of change. And I think the thing I'd like to leave you with is that, it's a process, and it's really a process called life. It's really, when we're not doing it, we're just kind of surviving. But when we really embark on this, we're really committed to change, and we're really understanding that, we're going to go through these periods where we're going to feel like we're really getting it, and then we're struggling, and then we really feel like we've got it again, and then that's just the way that it is. But even though it's, sometimes it feels like, and I can tell you from personal experience, sometimes like, oh my God, why am I even doing this? I could never go back to the way I used to live, which was just sort of fighting it and resisting it and doing my best to stay the same. As I become more comfortable with just understanding that this is just a much more fulfilling way to live, to just understand that I'm always going to be going through change. I'm constantly changing. As I've learned to let go of resistance to that, my life has gotten progressively more peaceful, and changes come about much more easier than they used to. And again, I hope this video gives you a little bit of insight into that, and how you can start using that for yourself. So in the near future, I'm going to be sending out some information about a little 6-week sort of training/coaching program that's really going to be about teaching you how to use these principles and use this information in your life in a much more meaningful way. So we're going to go into much more detail. There'll be a lot of question and answers, and it's really going to be a great program that you'll hear about in the very near future. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you found some value in this, and I look forward to connecting with you soon.